Marion, who always complained of my pride and called herself the Cinderella of the family. Her Cinderella-ship never brought her so low as this. Home, bitter mockery of a sweet word. She turns out of the shabby street into a street still shabbier, narrow, dirty, and out at elbows, yet at its worst not quite so bad as a modern street under the same conditions, for the red brick houses are substantial and roomy, and the worm-eaten oaken window frames shut out the wind better than the speculative builder's warped and shrunken deal. The house which Mrs. Stanmore enters is dark and gloomy. The wail of a fretful child sounds from the basement as she lets herself in at the street door with a convenient latchkey. A glimmer from the kitchen stairs is the only light visible, and to this glimmer Mrs. Stanmore seems to address herself. "I've brought home a haddock, Mrs. Bonney. Will you be kind enough to broil it at 6 o'clock? "Oh, very well," answers a querulous voice from unseen depths below. "You can put the haddock on the windowsill. I'll come and fetch it when I've got time, but I can't say nothing about it being done by 6, for me fire's got low after ironing." The parlour has gone out to tea. This last remark has a reproachful sound, as who should say, "You never spare me trouble by going out visiting." Mrs. Stanmore deposits the dried fish and ascends the dark, old-fashioned staircase, smelling of mice whose hurried scamper is audible behind the mouldering wainscot. One room, the first floor front, comprises Mr. and Mrs. Stanmore's share of number 11 Dixon Street. It is happily a rather large room, with 3 windows, provided with old-fashioned window seats. The furniture is old like the house, worn and dingy, but solid furniture that has served several generations of housekeepers and a ragged regiment of lodgers. In the glow of a cheery little fire, the dim old room has a homely, not unfriendly look. The old tent bedstead has been pushed into the most obscure corner. There are 2 armchairs with faded chintz covers, a sofa, large and ponderous. There is a round table opposite the wide old fireplace, and another table against the wall, surmounted by a japanned iron tea tray of a bright red ground with a landscape in the middle, a rosewood tea caddy, a pair of blown glass decanters empty, a family Bible, the landlady's, a ragged copy of Byron's Don Juan, and 2 odd duodecimo volumes of Tom Jones, in brown calf, the lodger's. Mrs. Stanmore lights a small paraffin lamp, takes off jacket and hat, and proceeds to prepare the evening meal. She has tea things and tea kettle to her hand in the roomy and mousy old closet behind the fireplace. Such a closet as is only to be found in old houses, large enough for half a dozen burglars to hide in, or a whole nursery of children to play in, and with all manner of odd corners and shelves, and perchance an inner cupboard lurking mysteriously in its panelled recesses. Mrs. Stanmore fills the kettle and sets out the tea things on the red japanned tray, and cuts a plate of bread and butter, and makes a round of toast deftly enough, though a year ago she was about the least handy of her sex in such small domestic offices. That stern schoolmistress, Necessity, has taught her many things. How young she looks in the ruddy light of the fire, as she kneels on the hearthrug toasting that round of bread for the poor meal that is to be dinner, tea and supper, all in one, for Mrs. Bonney's first-floor lodgers. How young and how pretty, every feature so daintily fashioned, eyes so darkly lustrous, colouring so delicate, young and with much need of love and sympathy, of comfort and careful tendance. And so Uncle Stephen has really come home, richer than we ever made him in our dreams when we were children, and Marion is tasting all the pleasures his wealth can buy for her. Marion, whom I pitied so when I left her behind me at Redcastle. She might pity me now, from the depth of her heart, if she could see me. She might have written to tell me the change in her fortunes. Selfish thing. I suppose it is on account of my not answering her last 2 letters. Such stupid letters as they were too, full of, "I hope you are free from cold," and "I trust you are enjoying the nice autumn weather," and Uncle Robert's rheumatic gout. She lapses into deeper meditation, looking into a red cavern in the heart of the fire, forgetful of the toast, which hangs despondently upon the 2-penny tin toasting fork, shaped like Neptune's trident. Meditation full of rue. for she has done the most foolish thing a woman can do, except one, which is to repent too late of her folly, and she is fast coming to that ultimate stage of foolishness, vain regret for an irrevocable act. She is still kneeling in front of the fire, absent-minded, absorbed, when the door opens and a young man comes in, slowly, heavily, like one who brings no gladness with him and has no hope of finding comfort at home. He comes quietly to the hearth, lays his hand upon Sybil's shoulder, and addresses her not unkindly, but with little warmth in his tone. "Well, little old woman, brooding over the fire as usual. What's the matter now?" "Not much more than usual," his wife answers, without looking up. "You've had your customary look, I suppose?" she inquires after a pause, during which her husband has taken off his shabby overcoat and flung himself into one of the armchairs. Yes, the wheel of fortune hasn't turned the other way yet. It revolves persistently, but always, like the planets, in the same direction. The immutable laws of bad luck are not to be abrogated in my favour. The fellows I wanted to see, butterfly friends of the past, who might lend me a fiver if I could catch them in the right humour, were all out. The situation I applied for has been given to somebody else. They had 139 applicants, the principal told me, and gave the berth to the applicant who dotted his I's with the nearest approach to mathematical precision. "We take a man's handwriting as the physical expression of his mental bias," said the principal, "and what we want is precision. Now you know I never dot my I's at all, or if I do, the dot is so far from the letter as to make my meaning all the more unintelligible. So much for the clerkship. The commission agency we saw advertised turns out a do. Agent required to put down £50 as a guarantee of bona fides. I applied for an agency in the wine trade, offered to a young gentleman moving in good society and able to push a new brand of champagne, but when the wine merchant saw me, he asked rather pertinently if I moved in good society in this coat. I told him I was a gentleman by birth and education and knew some of the best people in London. "Very likely, my dear sir," replies the great doctor, "but you don't visit them. We want young men who dress well and look as if they could afford to drink the wine they recommend. Men who have the appearance of wealth with the unscrupulousness of poverty." Rather neatly put by our friend, the gooseberry fermenter, wasn't it? "And you have done nothing, earned nothing, are no nearer earning anything than you were yesterday?" asked Sybil, without lifting her eyes to his face. Yet the time was not a year ago, when to gaze upon that countenance seemed to her like reading a poem, when every turn of the handsome head, every sparkle of the dark eyes ever of uncertain